The first time I saw her, she was standing in the rain. Not earth rain, of course. This was the acidic drizzle of Zorath 4, a planet on the fringes of the Galactic Coalition. The droplets sizzled against her iridescent skin, but she didn't seem to care. Her long silver hair clung to her face, and her luminescent eyes, like twin moons, locked onto mine. She was beautiful, ethereal, and utterly out of place in the grimy spaceport where I worked as a mechanic. I didn't know who she was at first. How could I? She looked like any other alien refugee, fleeing the endless wars that ravaged the outer systems. But when she stumbled toward me, her delicate hands trembling, and collapsed into my arms, I knew something was wrong. "Please," she whispered in perfect galactic common, her voice trembling. "They're coming for me." I didn't ask questions. I didn't have time. The sound of boots pounding against the metal walkways echoed through the spaceport, and the harsh glow of energy rifles lit up the shadows. I dragged her into my workshop, slammed the door shut, and barricaded it with a rusted starship engine block. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice low and urgent. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I am Lyria," she said, "princess of the Zorathian Dominion." Blinked. A princess. Here. In this dump. Didn't make sense. The Zorathian Dominion was one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, their technology light years ahead of anything humanity had ever dreamed of. And yet, their princess was huddled in my workshop, clutching my grease-stained coveralls like they were the only thing keeping her alive. "Why are they after you?" I asked. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the door. "My brother," she said finally. "He wants me dead. He's taken control of the Dominion, and he won't stop until I'm gone." I didn't have time to process that. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. I grabbed a plasma wrench from my tool belt and stood in front of her, my heart pounding. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a hero. I was just a guy who fixed starships for a living. But I wasn't about to let them hurt her. The door burst open, and a squad of Zorathian soldiers stormed in. Their armor gleamed in the dim light, and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. I raised the wrench, knowing it was useless but refusing to back down. "Step aside, human," their leader snarled. "This doesn't concern you." "She's under my protection," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. The soldier laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Your protection. You think you can stop us?" I didn't get a chance to answer. Lyria stepped forward, her tear-streaked face hardening into a mask of defiance. "Leave him alone," she said. "If you want me, take me. But let him go." The soldiers hesitated, glancing at their leader. He nodded, and two of them grabbed her arms, dragging her toward the door. She didn't struggle. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a sadness that cut deeper than any blade. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And then they were gone. I couldn't let it end like that. I didn't know why, but something about her courage, her vulnerability, struck a chord in me. I spent the next few days gathering information, calling in favors, and scraping together enough credits to buy passage to Zorath 4. It was a suicide mission, but I didn't care. Had to try. When I finally reached the Dominion's capital, I was stunned by its grandeur. Towering spires of crystal and steel pierced the sky, and the streets were filled with beings from 100 different worlds. But beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of fear. The people whispered of a tyrant who had seized the throne, of a princess who had vanished without a trace. I found her in the palace dungeons, locked in a cell that glowed with energy-dampening fields. She looked even more fragile than before, her silver hair dull and her luminous eyes dimmed. But when she saw me, A spark of hope flickered in her gaze. "You came back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told you I would," I replied, fumbling with the lock. It was a complicated piece of Zorathian tech, but I'd spent enough time tinkering with alien machinery to figure it out. After a few tense minutes, the field flickered and died. She stumbled into my arms, her body trembling. "Thank you," she said. "But you shouldn't have come. It's too dangerous." "I'm not leaving without you," I said firmly. We didn't have much time. The palace was crawling with guards, and it wouldn't be long before someone noticed the disabled cell. I led her through the labyrinthine corridors, relying on the schematics I'd memorized to guide us. But as we neared the exit, we were confronted by a figure I recognized immediately. Prince Kale, Lyria's brother. He was tall and imposing, his armor gleaming with the same iridescent sheen as Lyria's skin. But where her eyes were filled with warmth, his were cold and calculating. "So," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "the human thinks he can steal my sister away. She's not yours to control," I shot back, stepping in front of Lyria. Kale laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You think you understand our ways, human. You think you can save her. She's a pawn in a game you can't even comprehend." "I don't care about your games," I said. "I care about her." For a moment, Kale looked almost impressed. Then he raised his hand, and a dozen soldiers materialized from the shadows, their weapons trained on us. "Take them," he ordered. I braced myself for the end, but Lyria stepped forward, her voice ringing out with a power that surprised even me. "Enough," she shouted. "I will not let you harm him. If you want to kill me, do it. But let him go." Kale hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "You would sacrifice yourself for this creature?" "He's more of a person than you'll ever be," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. For a long moment no one moved. Then Kale lowered his hand, a strange expression on his face. "Very well," he said. "Take her. But know this, human. You've made an enemy of the Zorathian Dominion. There will be consequences." I didn't care. I grabbed Lyria's hand and ran, not stopping until we were safely aboard my ship. As we hurtled through hyperspace, she turned to me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Why risk everything for me?" I didn't have a good answer. Maybe it was because she reminded me of everything humanity could be: kind, brave, and selfless. Maybe it was because, in a galaxy filled with darkness, she was a light worth fighting for. "Because you're worth it," I said simply. She smiled, a radiant, heartbreaking smile, and leaned her head against my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. We didn't know what the future held. The Dominion would come for us, of that I had no doubt. But for the first time in my life I felt like I had a purpose. I wasn't just a mechanic anymore. I was a protector, a friend, and maybe, just maybe, something more. As the stars streaked past the viewport, I realized something that left me stunned. In saving her, she had saved me too.